Hi, I'm Tyson Franklin, and welcome to this week's episode of It's No Secret Dr. T. With me today is Chris Kappas, and he loves trade shows and believes that they are the most potent way to build a business when done right. He has a really awesome business called Exhibits Hub, and it's often referred to as the Airbnb for exhibits, which we're going to discuss this and a whole lot more today. So, Chris, how are you doing today?
Terrific, Dr. T. Thanks for having me.
No, this is exciting. Just before I press record, I was mentioning that I think a lot of businesses, they go to a trade show at a conference or something like that, and I've heard people talk and say, yeah, I really thought about doing a trade show, but it just seems so hard. I could never have the equipment set up as flash as what other people do. And that's where your business actually steps in and helps people.
Yeah, exactly. Think about it. You look at the marketing mix, and there's nothing that has the physicality of trade shows. It's a long sales build-up and process. The actual physicality of working a show floor is very hard. If you're doing the setup and dismantle, it's just, So my point is that it is, if you look at direct mail, advertising, all the other parts of the marketing mix, those are relatively easy compared to the face-to-face experience of trade shows. So in recognizing that, and also looking at that the world's changed a lot and people are more open to sharing.
Yeah.
But no one has really brought forward a model to the trade show industry that you could optimize and leverage assets that are sitting idle in inventory. And the interesting thing is there's thousands of exhibits. I'm not talking about, ones that are dusty and old. I'm talking about ones that corporation maybe goes to 3 or 4 shows a year, and the other 7 months of the year they sit idle. Why not turn those into revenue generators for the owner of that exhibit and be able to essentially rebrand them for another user? So very similar in concept to Airbnb in the sense that you're optimizing an asset. And for the owner, they're able to make money. And for the supply chain, you're able to introduce and bring a new client into your business. And it really fosters, I think, an opportunity for smaller businesses to participate in trade shows, whereas in the past it's been so expensive.
Okay, so what you're saying, it's like if I had a rental property and it's just sitting there, I go, let's contact Airbnb. So they do all the work. And most people know how Airbnb works. So you're saying if I was a corporation or a business and I had a trade display that I'm using 3 or 4 times a year, and for the other 45 or 48 weeks a year, it's just sitting there in a locked away in my business.
Right.
You link somebody else who's looking for a trade display with me, and then also with another business that will rebrand my trade so it can be used multiple times throughout the year.
That's correct. Exactly right. And it's designed to be very easy. The site, it's just like Airbnb in the sense that you identify a city you're going to be exhibiting at. You identify the type of space that you've procured, and that, typically they're 10-foot blocks.
Yeah.
And you're able to, identify, call it the design parameters you're looking for, right? Do you need conference areas? Do you need one-to-one consultation stations? Do you need, different types of graphics, right? And the algorithm in the back end brings forward exhibits that meet your demand. So those are brought forward to you and presented to you in a way that you can shop. And you then, if you have an interest, you can hit request, no cost to request an exhibit. And the firm that's warehousing that exhibit will then, and typically these are the top exhibit firms in North America, and I'm certainly looking globally, will reach out to you and talk about the current exhibit, what you like about it, what you like to change. And they'll go through a design iteration, a discovery with you to revamp it.
Yeah.
And within about 48 hours, you'll receive a turnkey proposal, redesign, if you will, and a price that's all inclusive to deliver it show ready at that particular show.
Yeah, well, I did a display, an exhibit with some friends a few months back for a podiatry conference. And the only thing we're offered prior to that is the conference organizer will say, here's this company that provides furniture. And you go, okay. And it's a couple of dodgy chairs, a wobbly table, a bit of a bench. There's no branding. They charge you like an angry wounded bull. and you sort of just go, we are just getting ripped off here. And then you've got to bring your own stuff to sort of hopefully put some pictures around to try and brand it. And I've often heard people just say the cost of doing it is what puts them off from doing an exhibit.
Well, that's right. I mean, the interesting thing over the last decade, floor space has gone up 300%. And most people, you scratch your head saying, how can it go up so much? Well, here's the reality. Show organizers, whether you're a for-profit or a not-for-profit show organizer, they earn about 60% of their revenue to run that operation using trade shows.
Yeah.
So it is a profit center for them, and that's why they host trade shows. It's part of a trade to bring a community together, which is important. But at some point, once the costs exceed the value, and I think that is perhaps the question on most exhibitors' minds today is, geez, I'm spending X. Am I optimizing the opportunity? Because it is a high cost.
It is. And I think a lot of people, sometimes they'll do it once. They don't do it very well.
That's right.
And then they don't do it again. Whereas there's a strategy behind, I assume, setting up a display the right way.
Yeah. I mean, here's something else to think about. 40% of most business-to-business budgets, marketing budgets, go into trade shows. It's the largest single percentage of the spend that they have on an annualized basis, right? But the problem is that's been flat for a decade, right? So while their budgets are being challenged, the floor space and everything else is going up exponentially.
Yeah.
So guess what? Everything's getting pressed, right? So the whole value proposition of Exhibits Hub or what's happening is that those dollars have to come from somewhere. And the aim here is to lower the price point to exhibit so we can attract more people into what is really a critical face-to-face opportunity, because you have that customer coming to you.
Yeah.
So, but the math has to work, meaning, if you're a salesperson in the field, you're probably going to make 2 to 3 visits a day. You could do that in less than an hour at a trade show. So do the math. You multiply that by 8 hours a day. At a trade show, it's 24 connections you've made. These have to be qualified connections, right?
Yeah.
But how long would it take you to make 24 visits in the field? It would take you probably 2 weeks. So the point being that the value proposition has to make sense, and you have to look at it that way first and foremost before you even commit to taking a space.
I've never looked at it that way before. That when somebody sets up a display or an exhibit, that they're, especially if they're at a conference that is a targeted group. For example, I mentioned the podiatry conference. Who's at a podiatry conference? Usually podiatrists running around. Yeah, you don't get too many bakers, right, butchers, and candlestick makers there. So if somebody wants to talk to podiatrists, that is probably the best place to actually find them. So, or they could have a sales rep on the road running around visiting these podiatrists, but it's going to take a lot of time to see the same amount of people.
No doubt about it. And remember, from an attendee's perspective, they're there to see what's new. They're in a shopping mode. And where can they go and be able to see 100 or 1,000 different exhibitors focused on their industry? And they're coming with a need, and that need is to solve a problem they have. So the irony is, most people think trade shows are for selling. They're for listening. They're not for selling. Meaning, they serve a purpose. They're a part of the sales strategy, but you're ultimately there to accelerate the sales cycle. And the only way you do that is by asking the right strategic questions. So that's where things break down, because you take a salesperson in the field and you put them in a trade show exhibit. They're used to pontificating on the value proposition of their product or service. That's the wrong thing to do. You have to at some point work in the value, but you have to first of all decide, is this customer someone that is qualified? Do they have the resources, the time frame, the buying intent? I mean, go down all the qualification questions that are important that often aren't asked. And so where people get frustrated is, man, I spent this amount of money, I got this many leads, but nothing's turned into them. Well, guess what? They probably weren't very well qualified.
Yeah.
And it's that old adage, garbage in, garbage out. So that's the criticism of unfortunately, a very powerful medium that has been underutilized or misunderstood for years.
So are you saying when somebody's got a trade thing set up, one, they're there with the wrong intentions, they're trying to sell, and they're pushing too hard, and that pushes even sometimes qualified people, pushes them away because they just want a problem solved. They don't want someone selling to them. They want to show me some solutions.
Correct. So the first question really should be asked, what brings you to the show today?
Oh, good question.
That brings right out their intent for them to stop by and manage and maneuver your dialogue with that person. Look, they're not going to spend more than 5 or 6 minutes on any given time, right?
Yeah.
But if they are, and there's 10,000 shows in North America, right? 10,000, and half of them are medical conferences, and that's because of all the specialty and the vertical specialties that are out there. But so there's a lot of variety. There's a lot of different types of people that come in with a lot of different needs, wants, expectations. And I look at it as, just like being a good doctor, you got to ask the right questions. Why do you feel that way? What's hurting you? Why is it hurting you? When does it hurt you? It's all that discovery you go through to help diagnose a podiatry issue. No different than, when someone comes into your exhibit. What brings you to the show today? What are you experiencing currently? What do you like about what you're experiencing? What don't you like about what you're experiencing? And by the way, would it be helpful to you if this happened, right? So you have to be prepared to go through and handle that discovery in a careful, calculated, friendly manner.
Okay. So asking that question initially, which was, what brings you to the show today? So if somebody's there and they're going, oh, I'm here because my boss had a spare ticket and he said you should go along to this and go to some lectures. That person is probably not the right qualified person to be talking to about whatever it is that you're selling. They're not there to sell. They're there because it was a day off work.
Or you could say, if the boss gave them a ticket, you could ask this question. Well, that's interesting. What is it that you're interested in seeing today? What's your background?
Okay.
So you're able to flip that into, here's something else to reflect on. Especially, everyone complains about shows last 3 days, 2 days, whatever. The last hour, 2 hours, people say, I'm dead tired. I want to get the hell out of here. I want to pack up.
I know. And you can see that on the exhibitor's face that they want to go home.
And you know what happens? That is the time that serious buying occurs. Because by that point, your attendee has walked the show. They've already checked out the competition. They already know what it is that they're really interested in, and then they're gonna kind of circle back.
That's funny you should say that. I know when I've gone to events, I will walk the floor 3, maybe 4 times, looking at everything, talking to people, but it's right at the end that I want to make that decision on what I want to do. And sometimes I'll walk into a display or an exhibit, and they're packing up an hour early because they're like, oh, we've just had enough, we just want to go home, and you're getting no more information from them because they're pretty much they've had a gutful. And they're losing a lot of sales right there and then.
Dead on. I had a case in point where I was working an exhibit and Microsoft came in the last half hour of the show, and they had a crew of 4 or 5, right? They came in and they were going out for an RFP, a request for proposal for a new exhibit.
Yeah.
And it turned out it was really an entree into getting to know them. And after that meeting and subsequent ones, we ended up winning that business, and it was a multi-million-dollar opportunity. But here's the reality. You're right. Everyone's tired, but the time to be tired is not then because of what you just said,
Yeah, well, just going on my own buying habits, it's like you said, you might be going to a couple of lectures or a presentation. You come back in, you do a quick walk around. You're not going to make any decisions there and then because you don't know what's on the other side of the room yet. But once you've got through the room and there may be 3 or 4 competitors which are very similar, and you've weighed them up and you've looked at who you liked and who you didn't like, the product, it's right at the end. You go, I'm gonna go and talk to them before I leave. But when their body language is, we've had a gutful, and you can hear them whinge and complain, oh, my feet are tired, and
exactly.
Okay, so how can they overcome that? If somebody is an exhibitor, what's a good technique to not be tired at the end?
Well, at that point, I would encourage everybody to have a booth captain, first of all, that sort of, runs the show, that helps kind of keep everybody energized. It's really important that there's a schedule, of course, and that you rotate your staff every 4 hours, give them a break, rotate them. And also I bring energy bars. I make available last 2 hours, bring them together, last pep talk, boom, give them an energy bar. And just be very alert.
Yeah.
And the other key thing is at the end of that show, that's the time while things are still fresh to go through every single lead and to vet it, qualify it, rate it like 1 to 4, 1 being low, probably low qualification, 4 being high probability, high interest, and begin to grade them. And that becomes then, the starting point for what will ultimately end up in the hands of the field. And, the field salespeople are the ones that will then carry it forward. And unless we give them really good content, guess what? We get blamed for not bringing them good leads.
When you say, okay, so you got your booth captain and they're sort of controlling the show and calling the plays, and they're sort of like your quarterback or your halfback,
exactly.
depending what sport you're watching. So
soccer. Yep.
Yeah. So if you've got a business that's a lot smaller and they don't have as many people at the booth, sometimes there'll be 2 people and they're there from morning right through to the end of the day, and they'll be there 3 days in a row. Any tips for them to sort of get their energy up, or just
don't go drinking the night before? Yeah, exactly. It's just look, we've all been there, right? Where 1 glass turns into 2, and next thing you know, you're not the sharpest the next morning, right? Not the sharpest pencil.
That's funny.
So it's pace. It's also pace, and but if you're really working it hard, you should be able to qualify 3 to 4 visitors an hour.
Yep.
And that's reasonable. And so you aggregate that times 8 shows. That's 32 visitors a day. That's good work. And you might even if you have to have a staff, you might develop an award system for the person or people that produce the most qualified leads, right? Do a little bit of show and tell and congratulate them, give them some attaboys or attagirls in front of everybody, right?
Okay, yeah.
So you very much you use that coaching analogy, and I know you do mentorship and other things. That's what it's about is keeping everybody focused and motivated and focus on the bigger picture.
No, that makes sense. And there was something that when I was asking were there any particular points that you wanted to cover, and there was something you wrote down that sort of really intrigued me. And you said that baby boomers, like the demographic from baby boomers to millennials, is changing trade shows and exhibiting. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, thanks. Well, for the first time, we see it in business. Baby boomers are now merging into higher decision-making roles, and their perception of trade shows. They grew up in a period where trade shows perhaps weren't as serious as they are now. So they're coming in with obviously more tools. They're doing more research in advance. They're I would say they're more prepared and more to walk a show and to be engaged than I'll call it in the baby boomer period where they were running shows.
Yeah.
And so, let's face it, their motivations are different. I have 3 kids. They think differently than their dad, of course. And they're less about, they're more about experience and less about owning things. So you look at what's going on in the sharing world. And we touched on this earlier between, Airbnb, Lyft, Uber, ride sharing, look at work sharing, at WeWork. So globally, there's a shift, and that shift's being driven by baby boomers by and large, and the Gen Zs who are coming in, who were not born without the access to information on their hand. They have it right there, and so they're coming into a show, and you notice most of them don't make eye contact with you. They're busy reading something on their phone, right? Yeah. So I wrote a blog a while ago about I wonder if the position of the neck will change over time as we get, because people are always bending down, and you think about, I called it the gooseneck, the swan issue. Are they gonna, are we all gonna, is everything gonna be no longer eye level, but at your waist? You normally put graphics up at eye level. Well, people are looking down. Maybe they should be below the kneecaps.
Well, I must admit, because like I do a lot of flying. And years ago, you used to get on a plane and you sit down and everyone would start talking to each other in the seat. Now you sit down, and before you've even buckled up, 90% of people have got their electronic devices out, their heads are down, they're looking at it. or they've already got the headphones in, watching the movie in the seat in front, and hardly anyone talks.
Well, and so the question then comes back to trade shows a minute, with that kind of attendee coming in and they're looking at their phone. How do you engage them? How do you get their attention? You know?
Yeah.
So I'd like to, you know, just offer something up here that, you know, everyone, you know, a lot of shows, there's a lot of money spent on spiffs, you know, premiums and giveaways, right? I'm a believer that, you know, a lot of that stuff ends up getting trashed. People love spiffs, and that's okay, but
it's all like swag.
Come up with swag, yeah.
Yeah.
But the more I'll call it the more direct way of breaking that ice, you need an icebreaker. And an icebreaker to me is something that you can put in that person's hands as they're walking down the aisle. And think about it. When you're walking the show, everyone says, "How you doing?" Well, of course you're going to keep walking, right? You know, I'm doing fine. Thanks for asking. You know, rarely are you asked an open-ended question that strikes you, and or are you given something that someone says, "Hey, have you ever seen how this can improve your podiatry practice?" You stick it in their hand, right? You break the ice. You have to somehow break the transition space between the aisle and in your exhibit. So that's another little thing I would pass along, that icebreakers and tools that are not premiums necessarily, but that are product or service related, that, you know, something clever that ties into your practice would be something that I would definitely be thinking about for your next trade show.
Okay. And if somebody had a different type of business that wasn't, say, in healthcare.
Yep.
So it's like, it's something what will capture the person's attention as they're walking past. Yep. And it gives them a reason to stop and talk to you.
Exactly. Like for example, Machine Tools Show. They're demonstrating machine tools. Well, they have the advantage. They have technicians and engineers who are actually producing, you know, in plastic parts and pieces. I mean, that's different. You could take that plastic part and piece and use it as a door opener or an engager. You know, in the podiatry practice, I'm not sure what that might be. You would know better, but I think the more we can bring some physicality into that introduction, the more apt you are to engage and get people to stop. And that's always the trick.
One thing I've always noticed, any booth that is giving away T-shirts always seems to get people to stop, because everyone loves a free shirt.
Yeah, everyone loves a free shirt. And the issue is, you know, if you ask them, you know, if it's logo, that's one thing. But if you remind them or ask them, where did you get that from? They'll say, oh, it's somewhere over there. You know, they don't remember the exhibit. They don't remember anything. They just remember, you know, I think I was over there, you know, look for the line.
You
know? Look for the line, you know.
Okay. And another thing you wrote down that I thought this was really interesting, and you said exhibit staff are actors.
Yeah. Well, think about it. I mean, you know, we all love to go to great stage plays.
Yeah.
You know, and you think about the preparation of stage plays. You know, you have several things going on simultaneous that are synchronized. You have the actor or actress that need to know their lines. You have the stage setting, and call it the props, that all have to be staged properly. And so in a lot of ways, trade shows and exhibits are stages for actors, and those actors are your staff. And they have to be prepared, just like actors, with knowing how to ask the right questions and knowing how to facilitate that discovery and to be able to, you know, move the conversation along, right? And have the sensibility and sensitivity of knowing when you've gone far enough, where that person's fatigued and they want to move on, right? So it's very much, and you know, it's a stage, but I also like to think of it as it's a machine for selling. Think about it, all the gears and all the things that go into machines.
Yeah.
It creates output. So the raw material for us, as we think about trade shows, is the prospect that comes in. You put the prospect into the machine and you come out with a good qualified lead if you're good at it, right? But all those little synchronized elements need to come into play to be sure that, you know, you've taken them on this journey, and that journey, albeit maybe 5 or 6 minutes, leaves with an impression, right? So yeah, it's a stage, it's actors, it's drama, it's excitement, and remember, the new audiences, they're all about experiences.
Yeah.
So, you know, you go to Consumer Electronics Show, for example, 150,000 people in Las Vegas. You think they sell anything there at that show? Zero. Now I say that because everyone that's there is going to see what's new at retail, right? But the distributors, there's only a half a dozen to a dozen distributors of that equipment that we buy and listen. You're talking on a microphone that you buy from, right? So it's not about selling; it's about creating experiences for people that is then promoted through media. Think about it: the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Los Angeles, they all publish and report about the trade show. And by the way, the CEOs are the ones that get, they're invited to speak. So all of a sudden now you get that push on the stock, and you get analysts who come in, so that's the soft science of trade shows. We've been talking hard science, but that is really the soft side of the value proposition of trade shows as well.
That makes sense.
Media and exposure,
Yeah, because like a recent conference I went to was a podcasting conference. And I remember when I went to one last year, and it was a big event, over 2,000 people there, heaps of electronic companies, microphones and apps and all the bells and whistles that went with it. I had so much fun pushing buttons and playing with things. And and there were some people there who were trying to sell things on the day, and straight away, your wall would come up and go, "Oi, don't try and sign me up now." But you went away with some of the equipment, like the microphone that I'm using. I got that after the event because I think someone from that event was speaking. Then I spoke to somebody else. And then as I was talking to other people, they were mentioning their microphones. And I've gone, I've already played with that one. I'm going to get myself one of them as soon as I get back. And that's exactly what I did. So it was, there were a few people that were trying to ram things down my throat, but I couldn't tell you what companies they were because all of a sudden my defenses went up.
Yeah.
So it's quite interesting. One thing you said too, when we were talking about the exhibit staff, like see it being actors, and you've got your booth captain. So your booth captain is almost like the leading man or lady in a movie, and then there's like the director in the background, which is helping to set the whole thing up in the first place.
That's right.
Which is then when they may contact like your company about getting this equipment set up in the first place without actually having to go and buy all their own.
Right. One other thing to keep in mind is, there's often this comment might be meant for a little larger exhibitor other than a two-person staff, but when attendees come in, they have something they want to solve. We talked about that, and that a salesperson can't always solve that. So it's important to think about the mix of your staff. What disciplines are they from?
Yeah.
You're certainly going to need a salesperson. You're certainly going to need probably a technical engineer, someone who is a problem solver, because that person coming in wants that problem solved then. They don't want to hear about it 3 weeks from now.
Yeah.
It's on their mind. You're going to want to probably have a marketing person there, and you're going to want to have a senior person, So the mix is going to be important because everyone relates differently. If you go to an engineering show, engineers want to talk to engineers. They don't want to talk to a salesperson. Probably no different than doctors, right? You're podiatrists. You want to talk to podiatrists. You don't want to talk to someone else.
Yeah, if there's a specific piece of equipment that a podiatrist would use, then if there's another podiatrist that happens to be working for that company who's talking about it, it does make a lot more sense than just a salesperson that will tell you that it's great, and you're going, well, you're not going to tell me otherwise.
But just think about all the things we've covered thus far. And that's why trade shows are complicated and they're difficult, because there's a lot of things to consider, right? And if you think about it, there are some companies that do hundreds of shows a year. How do you produce that? I mean, it is a rigor for major companies to produce and host simultaneously conventions across the U.S. or globally. And that's why you have to be sure that your staff, your actors, are all trained, and that they all, know what they need to know, and they're brand ambassadors, and they know how to go through the discovery process and really vet that opportunity out.
No, that makes sense. So where do you see the future of trade shows?
No, look, face-to-face is never going to go away.
Yeah.
In fact, it's interesting because you would think due to expense that trade shows would be losing attendance. It's not. It's been steady. You'd think that there'd be a drop in exhibitors. Not true. It's been steady. In fact, I saw a study yesterday. We're just right around, what's the term I want to use? We're tracking with the economy.
Yeah.
Usually trade shows are a little behind in the sense that if there's any recession coming up, we won't see that until after the recession hits, because all that money is already preset and somewhat spent. So we're the last to enter and the last to come in.
Yeah, because a lot of people with trade shows, it's not something you go, oh, let's do next week's trade show. A lot of those spaces have been sold 6-9 months ahead, if not 12 months ahead, pre-sold from a year before.
Exactly. In many cases, you don't even leave that show without going to a space draw, and they bring you up and you have to pick your space, and you have, they got you locked down, and that's for not only the show's success, but cash flow. They have, it's a machine.
Yeah.
So back to your question, it's going to continue to evolve. We're seeing an explosion of experiential events now occurring. And, so trade shows, think about the evolution of, first of all, it started off, in years ago when they had tea merchants and you think about it was all face-to-face selling. And then it came into World's Fairs, and World's Fairs came into trade shows when associations formed. So there's a natural progression, evolution of face-to-face selling, right?
Yeah.
So there's always going to be trade shows. They're going to continue to iterate based upon, I think, the consumer and what the consumer wants. Retail is having to, evolve, given Amazon what they're doing. So trade shows will have to remain relevant. The only thing to remain relevant is to go where the buyers are going and being sure that they offer value proposition you can't get through any other medium.
So it's interesting when you just mentioned Amazon then too. So when a lot of people are saying, oh yeah, retail is dying, shops are finding it harder to fill retail space in shopping centers. The retail industry is on a downward spiral. But still, even if people are online doing a lot of shopping and they're looking at a lot of different products, eventually they're still going to try and go to a trade show to actually physically touch some of those products, especially if it's industry specific.
No, you're absolutely right. Think about I'm not aware of any capital equipment, bulldozers, so on and so forth, that are sold without a trade show.
Yeah.
If you're going to spend $100 and some $1,000 on a piece of capital equipment, you're going to want to kick the tires, go out to a proving ground, drive it, whatever, right? But the interesting thing is, you look at Tesla. Here's a car that's sold online. So there is some foray into selling capital equipment online. In a sense, I'm selling capital equipment online. It's a tough sell because people want to touch it, and they want to customize it, right? Are you familiar with the business Carnova?
No.
And the cars you actually buy online, you can go to a 5-story building that has cars stacked on one another. There are conveyors. You put a quarter in, or whatever the coin is, and the car drops down, and that's where you take delivery of the car.
Oh, right.
All
No, I haven't seen that.
Oh yeah, and they are basically disrupting the traditional notion of dealer sales of automobiles, right? And think about how progressive that is. You can go online now and shop and look at every element of that car before you buy it, and they deliver it to you. You have 7 days to test drive it, and if you don't like it, they'll come and pick it up.
Oh, that's nice.
So my point being that everything that we thought was not possible is possible. It's just people have to adapt their thinking to it, and it's the technology now that allows them to do that.
Okay. So getting back to your business though.
Yeah.
Where Exhibits Hub, firstly, how can people get hold of you? If they want to know more about Exhibits Hub, they're going, okay, I'm thinking of doing some exhibits in different parts, like at the moment, throughout America, and they want to know more about the services that you offer. What's the best way of getting hold of you or going to the website?
Yeah. I'm available 24/7. The website is Exhibits Hub, as it sounds, exhibitshub.com. On the site, there's contact form. being that this is a new business, I'm going to be involved, obviously, in getting to know every customer because it's my value. I have to understand kind of what the needs, wants, expectations are, so I can continue to improve the business. But I'll facilitate that introduction to the exhibit firm that has that exhibit, and then it'll go from there. So any questions, drop me an email. My email is ckappes, Kappes @exhibitshub.com. And you can also call me. Am I able to? Should I put my
put your mobile number there. You put the mobile number down. I'll put it in the show notes, and if people want it, they can just go there and grab it.
Yeah, it's 312-919-5544.
So what you're saying, somebody could be in California, for example, and there's a trade show. For example, like I was in New Jersey.
Yep.
New Jersey. I was in Atlantic City for a podcast conference. So somebody might be in California and they want to go and do a trade show or an exhibit in Atlantic City, and they're going, the thought of actually having to put an exhibit together, pack it up, stick it on a truck and get it across the other side of the country, you know what, it seems too hard. But they could contact you. You could put them in touch with somebody in that area who's got a display.
Yep. The site's all designed to do that.
That's sitting there.
About it this way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to ship that cross country, it's probably going to cost you $6,000 to $8,000 for a truck, right? Let alone the carbon and waste, associated with that. So, this is very much, I'm very concerned with, as well are with climate change, and, the ability to ship right down the street is a whole lot smarter and less costly than shipping things cross country, right?
Yeah.
And when you consider carbon tax, and that's probably going to be a reality sooner than we think, prices are going to go up. So it just makes sense to have assets local to the trade show that you can customize and make them your own.
I just think it's a great idea because the amount of people I know who have not done a trade show because the cost of getting something from one part of the country to another. And like I said, I was at one recently, and I've got a friend who's done a lot of trade shows. And whenever I'm talking to him about, you're going to do the next conference, he's like, he says, it's just getting stuff there. It just costs so much. That's what puts us off. So you've pretty much almost found the solution for a lot of problems that people are having with setting up a display.
Well, thank you for that. My challenge, this is the two-sided marketplace. So I have to have supply.
Yeah.
So I have to have a lot of inventory, and I have to create demand.
So if people have done displays themselves and they've got equipment sitting in rooms that they can contact you as well and say, hey, I've got this equipment here in my office, I'm in this town, and they can link with you as well?
Well, what would happen in most cases is they would have probably, if they have, sizable equipment, it would be stored with an exhibit firm.
Okay.
And so, I'm working through exhibit firms primarily because they have the means of prepping and regraphicing exhibits and getting them, to show site set up and all logistics. So they're really, so if there was that interest, they could certainly reach out to me and I can coach them on that.
Yeah.
But it would be to go to their exhibit firm and say, hey, look, I want to make some money on my exhibit when it's otherwise sitting idle. And the exhibit firm and that person could reach out to me, and we could discuss how to best do that.
Cool. I think that's fantastic. So, Chris, before we finish up, if you've got one final exhibit tip for people listening to this now, if they're sitting there going, I want one more thing, Chris, give it to me. What's some parting advice?
Parting advice, think of the exhibit as a machine for selling. You gotta build it, and you gotta have the raw material. You gotta be prepped for it. And it's all about preparation. Too many people just kind of go in and realize, oops, I'm in over my head,
Yeah.
and so it's all about the preparation.
So you said it's a machine for selling, but on the day when you're there, you're listening, you're not selling.
That's correct. Yeah. I mean, you got to think about, yes. Well said.
Okay. That is fantastic. So, Chris, I want to thank you for coming on It's No Secret with Dr. T. This has been a pleasure. I've learned a little bit more about exhibits and what should be going on in the minds of the people who are running a display or an exhibition at any particular event. So thank you very much.
It's been a joy. Thanks for your time, and thanks for the listeners.
No, I reckon if anyone didn't get something of this, what I normally say, give yourself an uppercut and go back and listen to it again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. See you later.
See ya. Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to Chris today, and I'm sure you got a pile of takeaways. This is the first time I've spoken to anybody about exhibits or setting up trade shows. I thought it was really, really interesting. And there's a couple of points I want to mention again. And I thought one of the biggest points is when he was talking about millennials, how their thinking is completely changed to baby boomers or people in the past, and because they're more about experiences, not ownership. So what he's doing with Exhibit Hub, where people can borrow something instead of owning it, I think is a fantastic idea. And I think that's going to happen a lot more in the future. But a couple of other points that I thought were worth mentioning again was when he was saying companies that will take a big part of their marketing budget and they will use that to go to trade shows, because if they can put the right salesperson in front of the right people, it saves them a lot of time. Like you said, a salesperson on the road may take a couple of, can see a few people a day, whereas they can see a few people an hour at the right trade show. And I think that's the important part. You've got to be at the right trade show. And the last thing I think is worth mentioning again and again and again is whenever you're at a trade show, you're not there to sell, you're there to listen, and you need to ask the right questions. And that first question that he mentioned, what brings you to the show today, I think is brilliant. So that should be something you should write down on a pad and make sure you have that at your booth the next time you go to a trade show. So pretty much that's it from me this week. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know it was a little bit different. It was a completely different topic to anything I've done before, which I think made it a bit of fun. And if you've been enjoying this podcast, like I always say, please tell your friends and family about it. And if you get the urge, and if you have your phone in front of you right now, or however you're listening to this particular podcast, please go on there, give us a rating and review, and let me know what you think. So that's it from me. Look after yourself, look after your family, and I will talk to you again next week. Bye for now.